My name is Mike. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Thank you for the introduction. And I could have said that about him, that he's been a great mentor and friend to me over the years. Um, so I'll give you a quick biography and work into other stuff. Grew up in the Midwest, born in Moline, Illinois, home of John Deere. Um, Pretty much a blue collar area, John Deere factories everywhere, Farmville International Harvester. I mean, we're the ones that produce the food in this country. Anyway, I used to get up in front of big groups and talk, and I gave seminars on hedging with financial futures and investments and all that. And we used to do this research about what groups were like, and research they found out that any kind of meeting didn't seem, if it was a smaller meeting or a great big meeting, that kind of about 15% of the people were thinking about stuff going on in their lives. I got to go to the grocery store, I got to do this, I got to, oh God, who's going to pick up the kids? And then another 15% were intently paying attention to the speaker. Well, the other 70%, believe it or not, were having sexual fantasies. I mean, it's pleasing to know so many of you are going to be entertained. So. Anyway, other research shows that on a list of fears, that public speaking is more fearful than dying. I used to think that. It's not true anymore. Anyway, grew up in Moline, Illinois. Started working when I was 11, paper route, cut grass, got a work permit, whatever that was, 14 and a half, 15. Always worked, had a strong work ethic, put myself through college, worked in John Deere factories a couple summers, one summer in a foundry. That is not fun. 130 degrees on the third shift, and I'm making molds on a line, and they're pouring iron right there. The guy's got the big old. That's when I decided I didn't want to live like that. My grandfather, as an immigrant, did that most of his life. I decided I needed to go to college, and I was going to stick with it. So I did, and went to college, University of Illinois. The freshman class was 20-some thousand, which was half the population of the university. And they said, half of you won't be back next year because we'll flunk you out. And so I got stuck in this housing off campus with 3 other guys. One was a senior, and he says, hey, you want to go get a beer? And I thought, sure, why not? Never had a beer before in my life. I grew up in church training, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Explorer Scouts, all through high school. I was on the swim team, I was editor of the sports page of our newspaper. I was just kind of a normal kid. Once a year at Greek Easter, my grandfather would pour little glasses of wine. And I mean, there were this many people in the room. I don't know, they had one bottle of wine, if you can imagine that. But anyway, they give me a little sip. So the guy says, let's go for a beer. That's great. We go to Cam's Bar, and we're sitting down at the end of the bar. There's 3 seats, and we're the next 2. And he orders a Budweiser draft. And I said, I'll have one too. And they're, a nice big 12 ounce. And I drink that thing, and it goes down. And oh my God, the world was okay. I mean, this is one swallow, and I finished the thing off, and it's wonderful. I mean, I'm glowing. I'm half in the bag with one beer, and this is the most wonderful. I mean, everything looks different. And there's something wrong with him, because we have the beer, we chat, and we leave. And so the next night, one of the other guys had been in the Army, and he said, I'm going to go get a 6-pack. You want to go with me? Sure. And we're in the liquor store, and I get a bottle of wine. I mean, my grandfather drank wine, right? and I drink the bottle of wine. I am so sick. I mean, I am just sick, sick, sick. So you're thinking, what would a guy like me do? Well, on the third night, I got the 6-pack of beer because obviously wine didn't agree with me. So I was just drinking the wrong stuff. And that was the beginning of it. You know, that feeling of the world that everything was okay. And then I found out, you know, you have a few beers, and I was never a good dancer. Man, could I dance after a few beers? I was pretty cool. Anyway, that started the deal, and I went through college. I was in a fraternity, not a regular frat house. I was in a service fraternity, Alpha Phi Omega. You had to have been a Boy Scout to be in it, and you know, we did service projects. But Thursday night was meeting night, and that meant, you know, we had our business meeting, our chapter meeting, and then we went out drinking, and that was great. Well, it wasn't too long. By the second semester, I realized having classes on Friday morning was really a bad idea because Thursday night was chapter night, and you know, you needed to be out there. And this tended to accelerate. I had the first semester, I had one little scholarship, and I paid for the rest of the stuff. Well, the first 4 semesters I'm there, I'm on probation, and I'm sure it wasn't the drinking. It's just that classes got in the way of doing stuff I wanted to do, which was mainly drinking, partying, and all that. So I went through that. I was in ROTC. Vietnam War is going on. This is like 62 to whatever the next 4 years are, 66. And so I'm in ROTC. I go the full 4 years. The drinking just kept accelerating in school. So then I get commissioned. I go in the Air Force. I met my first wife at the university. We get married in May. Our honeymoon is driving to my first duty assignment in Southern California, George Airplane Patch. And I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I'm the greenest of the green second Louis in the Air Force, but I'm assigned to a tactical fighter base. These are warriors. These are the best the Air Force has, the best flyers. These guys, we'd rotate squadrons to Vietnam. They would come back. They'd say, "There's this stuff that doesn't work in the books. This is how you really operate this aircraft." And they would rotate squadrons through. As a junior officer, I had all kinds of weird duties. Like one was mortuary officer. And you go on call on Friday night, and the sergeant is briefing me. You're on until Monday morning. He says, "Nothing ever happens. But the one thing you got to do is you can't drink." And I'm thinking, Friday night and you can't drink? And he said, "You can't drink the whole weekend." And I'm saying, "You mean like you can't drink too much?" And he says, "You can't have any alcohol, Lieutenant." And okay, well, I'm sitting at home and I'm waiting, and I'm saying, well, they're not going to call. I mean, you know, it's right in the fridge there, and I'll be damned. 2 hours in, they call and they say, one of these F4 drivers, they used to call it, the guys that graduate, and the mountains are out there across the desert, and they'd come in 50 feet off the deck, flip it upside down, and they'd call it climbing the mountain. Well, your stick's upside down, so if you're going up the mountain, you got to go forward. I mean, if you're going to go down, and forward to go up, upside down, reverse. This will take you up, right? Okay. Well, when you're going at about 800 miles an hour, 50 feet off the deck, it's easy to make a mistake. Sure enough, right into the side of the mountain, it augers in about 30 feet. They call me and they say, "Guess what? You're up. You got to come out here and, you know, do this stuff with all this." Those were not fun duties. And it ends up that one of the guys, the guy in the back seat of the F4, is a guy that was in my dorm 2 doors down that I'd known for 3 years. And so I had to talk to his wife. That wasn't near as hard as seating her in the chapel over there and seating his girlfriend on the other side. But Anyway, got through the Air Force. Well, a couple stories on the Air Force. First time I go into the officers club and they have a packaged liquor store. Johnny Walker Black Label, a liter for $1.80. I mean, I just can't believe this. I love scotch and beer. Beer is so cheap, they're almost giving it away. I had a chief master sergeant die, and he put me under his wing, and I was smart enough to say, whatever you say, Sarge, and he kept me out of jail for 4 years. He'd take me to the NCO club, and the NCOs were a lot more fun than the officers. But so I would rotate back and forth, and I'm just drinking like crazy, and it's so cheap and it's so easy. And if I don't show up in the morning, it doesn't matter. They'll cover for me. I mean, I'm privileged. I make it through that. I end up, one great thing in the Air Force, I got an MBA. They had a school on base. Anyway, University of San Francisco University. So I got an MBA with a finance major. My undergraduate is psychology and economics. So I'm going to go to work, right? And this whole time, my wife has a job. She's a math teacher, and she's got a teaching degree and another master's in, she has 2 masters, another master's in theoretical mathematics. She writes stuff out. I don't even know what's on the paper. I can't understand any of it. So she's working, and she's making 2 or 3 times what I'm making in the Air Force. We made a conscious decision. We're not going to have children. We're going to get XKE instead, and we did. It was steel gray with blue leather, and that sucker would go. And my wife was dangerous because if there was a car in front of her on the freeway, that meant they should be behind her, and she made sure that happened. So anyway, get out of there. It's time to go to work. We go back to Illinois. I'm going to go to work for my dad in his insurance business. That lasted a few months. I got licensed, and I didn't like working with my dad, and I hated insurance. So I sent out 400 resumes, and they write you letters back from California to Illinois. Hey, great resume. If you're ever in the neighborhood, stop in. Well, nothing was happening. I said to my wife, you know what? All these people say, if you're in the neighborhood, stop in. I got on a plane, flew to Southern California, and I stopped in and saw them. And one of them actually said, wow, never thought we'd see you. Would you like a job being the assistant treasurer of the savings and loan? And I said, sure, I'm fully qualified. And by the way, what do you do? I mean, I didn't have a clue on portfolio management. I had theory stuff, but never done it. And they said, well, we only have a little portfolio. It's about 15 million. And, you can do that. And I learned how to do the stuff. After a couple of years, this big association in Portland recruited me. And the next thing you know, we're living in Portland. And now I'm the assistant treasurer of a big S&L. And then I went to County Commodities, and financial futures came, and I became a semi-expert in that. And was consulting with a couple other guys with banks and S&Ls, and we'd show them how to change the risk in their portfolios. And guy in Memphis called and say, hey, this new stuff, we've got a brokerage firm here, about 400 people. We don't know how to do that, and we need to. Will you come out for 3 months? And so I flew out from Seattle to Memphis and wrote a training manual, got all the trading relationships set up with the Board of Trade and clearing brokers in Chicago, and did all this stuff, and put their 100 salespeople through the training. They had to have licenses and stuff. So when I said 9 months or 3 months is up, thanks guys, flew back out here. Chairman calls me and says, After you left, we realized we didn't have anybody to run our hedge division. Would you consider coming back? I said, absolutely not. We talked for an hour. We figured out the price of prostitution, and I flew back to Memphis. So I was there for 8 years. So all this time in school, the Air Force, progressively more responsible jobs, I'm always picking places where the culture either allows or tolerates or even encourages drinking. I mean, tactical fighter base, men drink. And that the commodities world is alcohol everywhere, the brokerage business I was in. So I ended up having senior licenses, I could supervise all the people. And so we have this trading room. You've seen them on TVs, these round tiered things. There's 100, 150 people, and the traders are down here, and you got 6 screens in front of you, and everybody's screaming and yelling, and it's all unintelligible. So I did that for 8 years. And so I said the culture there encouraged drinking. This is an example. There were kind of 2 cultures. There were the Southern Baptists that were pretty straight arrow and all great people. And then there were the rest of us. So one day I'm walking on this upper tier by the sales manager's door, and he's got one of the salesmen in there, and he's raising hell with this guy. And he's going, "What the heck is wrong with you, son? Don't you know you can't put $1,200 worth of cocaine on your expense statement? What's wrong with you anyway, boy?" He says, "You put that down as client entertainment." So it wasn't that they objected, it was just that you had to do it the way that they thought was acceptable. So I got to the point where I realized I need to calm down. I need to not be doing this so much. And this was early on in Memphis. And it started to scare me because I couldn't. I would get up in the morning and say, "Today I'm just going to go to the bar after work, have 2 beers, and go home." Never happened. I had 2 beers, and the next thing I know, the guy's saying, "Hey, buddy, get your butt out of here. We're closing." And then I'm remorseful, and I go home, and I'm not going to do it tomorrow. And I did it the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And it became apparent that I had absolutely no control over my behavior once I took a drink. I always thought I'm not going to drink the 10th one and I'll be fine. And I had a really bad habit I lived out about 10 miles on the freeway, and I would drive home drunk, and I had these big halogen lights on the front of this BMW, and I would get up behind cars and I'd start blinking those lights. And I just remember one time and this was almost nightly, this guy won't move over and I'm blasting away, and I'm going 115 and I'm right on his tail. I did that night after night after night. And I thought, my great intellect, I should be able to rationalize or at least logic this out. I could use logic, self-knowledge about how to stop drinking. And I couldn't. I tried things over and over and over, nothing worked. Every time I tried to stop, I had to have a little more. And there were times when I'd wake up in places that I didn't know where it was, didn't know how I got there. If I made it home, it was usually every morning I'd park outside the garage because I was afraid there was something that had happened. I'd walk outside, I'd walk around the car. I wanted to see if there was blood, dents, something, just to see what I had done because I could not remember. I knew I was in the bar, and the next thing I know, I'm in bed, or I'm waking up at home, or I'm not at home. So I couldn't stop when I wanted to stop, and I could not control my intake. It didn't matter what I did. It just had all the best intentions in the world. So all my upbringing, how I was raised and all that meant nothing. So there were 4 couples that were going to go. We were going to go on a ski trip to Austria, and I ended up, this woman that I'd been living with for a couple of years, she couldn't go, and then our corporate attorney, something happened with his date, so there's 2 of us stag and 2 other couples. We're in Austria, and oh my God, it was Fasching. And that's like Mardi Gras in New Orleans, they dress up in costumes, and the booze just flows everywhere. And we're there for a week, and it's just a big blowout for me. So we're staying in this hotel, and I'm really smart. So when I leave the hotel, the desk is over here, and they have cards, and I take one of those cards. It's got the address and the name of the hotel, right? Put it in my pocket. No way am I going to get screwed up. They'll either find me with that, or I'm still able to say, take me home. Well, so we go out drinking, a bunch of us, and except for one guy. And these 2 gals that are all dressed in their costumes, I'm drinking with them, and I've got all kinds of ideas in my head. And
Yes.
So before the ideas come to fruition, I know that they've left. I can't imagine that. So I'm drinking, and I'm feeling pretty bad. And the bartender suggests, it's time for you to leave. And I'm going, okay. And I pull out my card. Taxi. And the bartender's going, 9999. Yeah, taxi. Well, finally he calls a taxi. And I'm staggering out to the taxi. The taxi driver's looking at me. He opens the door, puts me in, starts the engine, does a U-turn, gets out, opens the door. Says, here you go. And I'm thinking, yeah, boy, anyway. So on this trip, one of the guys with us, we're sitting in a coffee shop, and he starts talking about drinking and the problem that he's had. He doesn't say anything about me. And he's real good natured. And this guy has just been appointed as a federal judge. And he's talking about going to AA, and I'm thinking, a federal judge in AA? Are you kidding? Those are the down and outs, right? And anyway, he goes through this whole thing about what it did, how he got in, and how it happened to him, and all that. And this is, it sounds like nonsense. I fly back to Memphis, and I mean, that was a horrible blowout that week there. And I start thinking about, I have absolutely no control, and I'm scared because I think my great intellect is going to do this. And I thought, well, that guy went to AA, so there's a noon meeting. I go in down not too far from the brokerage firm, and it's about this size, and there's 50 people in there, and they've got 2 of those big smoke removers, and it's like a fog. There's so much smoke, and I'm kind of trying to pay attention, and I'm thinking, my God, what's wrong with these people? They're whining about their lives, and I'm thinking, why don't they just pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Now remember, I don't have a clue. I feel like I'm totally hopeless. I don't know what else to do. I'm in AA, and my first thought is, what's wrong with these guys? So all the time I look back on it, and I say, my drinking life was characterized by, I associated with people I never thought I would associate with. I went places I never thought I'd go, and I did things I never thought I'd do. Well, then I came into AA, and here I am, associating with people I never thought I'd associate with, going to meetings I never thought I'd go to, and doing things I never thought I'd do. So what do I know? It was, anyway, couldn't stand that meeting, found another meeting in a trailer behind a church. And I'd like to say I walked in, I knew I was home. You know, my heart was warm. I didn't like that any better than the place that was filled with smoke. But there were a bunch of people there that grabbed hold of me, they welcomed me. There was a guy that was in the same business, and he sat me down. I listened to him talk, and I thought, this guy's pretty sharp. He doesn't sound like those other dunderheads. I mean, you know, my mind was so clear. I had the great ability to assess how other people behaved, right? So, and one of the things he said to me, well, Mike, if you sober up, it's probably going to be at least 6 months before you get all the stuff out of your system. And I'm going, no, I'm faster than most. And so it's probably 9 months. But anyway, he became my sponsor. And Steve has often talked about sponsor abuse, and I never knew the right term until I heard him say that. And my sponsor was guilty of sponsor abuse all the time. He laughed at all my ideas. He thought I was hysterical. You know, I would come up with stuff and he'd just be laughing away, and he'd say, why don't you try that? Tell me how that works out. And, anyway, he stuck with me. I ranted and raved. I told him, well, I've read through the steps. I've seen that, and you know, they seem good for a lot of people, but there's 8 that don't apply to me. And the other 4, I need to make a minor adjustments to them. And he said, yeah, great. He said, try it, see how that works out. And anyway, he said, I'll take you through the steps. But you got to do it the way I do it, not the way you do it. And I said, but I have great ideas. And he said, no, we'll just try it that way. So he did. You know, we get to the first step and we're talking about, we'd admit us, you know, we were powerless over alcohol, that I couldn't give up my mind, life was unmanageable. And I said, yeah, I think I'm hopeless with alcohol. I don't think there's any way out. But unmanageable. And he said, well, remind me again. I told him some of my car wreck stories. And I said, tell me some of those car wreck stories again. And I said, well, my wife knew this guy that had a winery, and they had a big party, and we went out to the party, and, you know, we're helping them pick grapes and drinking wine all day, and I'm drinking and drinking and drinking. And that's the last thing I remember until I'm standing in the middle of this farmer's field. And my wife is out of the car, and she's bleeding up here. And I'm looking at the car, and that looks sort of like my car. It's this 3 Series BMW. Well, the only thing wrong with it is that the black back windshield's blown out. The trunk is pushed up even with where the windshield was. The engine block is up under the transmission. One of the front wheels is ripped off. Don't know where it is. The other one's folded under. And, you know, there's not a panel on the body that's not totally pushed in. And then I remember I was driving that car, and I just opened the door and got out. She opened the door and got out, and I thought, man, those German engineers are good. Well, I'm standing there watching this pile of junk, and there's cop cars, and I guess in Oregon at the time, if you weren't in the car, they couldn't give you a DWI. So this is about the 4th time that something's happened where I've done something to a car, and I'm standing out there, and the cops give me a ride home or something. Well, anyway, this ETM guy comes up, or the ambulance guy. I see him, he looks at the car, he goes in the back, he grabs a body bag, and he comes out, and he's standing next to me, and he said, body, somebody get thrown out of that car, where is it? And I said, no, I was driving. And he looks at me, he turns gray. I mean, I could just see. And he said, I've never seen a car that looked like that where anybody lived. Well, it ends up, the farmer standing there, he says, well, do you know what happened? And I said, not really. He said, You went over that embankment, you nosedived into the ground, you flipped the car end over end, and then you rolled it about 4 times. Now, go to the hospital, there's a plastic surgeon there, she fixes my wife, we go home. I'm starting to wake up and think, my God, this has got to be the bottom. This has got to be the bottom. Get on my knees, we're praying, the foxhole prayer. Never do this again, promise, really, I won't. I'm not drinking again. I only drank for 8 more years. So, there was nothing I could do that was gonna, are we near the end? All right, I need to speed it up. I've spent way too much time on that. Well, my point with all of that is there is absolutely nothing that would impress me to change my way of living. What impressed me was when this sponsor sat me in these rooms and I started listening to people, and they told all parts of my story. It wasn't one, it was parts. And I thought, they get it. Well, then they said, and here's what we did. We quit doing that. We did that stuff, and our lives changed. And you don't have to do that anymore. He took me through the steps, and that was that story. He said, those things, Mike, kept happening over and over and over in your life. You don't have any control over your life. So I didn't want God. I didn't want a spiritual solution. I wanted you guys to solve my problem, but I didn't want what you offered me. I didn't want the spiritual solution. And he gave me the book. We're reading the book, on the very front page, it says it's the story of how these hopeless people recovered from alcoholism. And that was me. That's how I saw myself, as hopeless. And we went through the whole thing. We got to the 4th step, and he would give me little assignments, and I'm writing it out. And he said, well, are you ready to take your 4th step? Well, I'm not quite done. He says, I'll be over at 10 o'clock Saturday. We'll do it then. So we did it that way, and that's how he did everything with me. He'd always say, there's a meeting at 7, be there. And I'd start to answer him, and he'd hang up the phone. And if I didn't show up, the next time he'd come pick me up. He took me to dances. After the meetings, he'd take me to coffee afterwards. He put me in the center of the corner booth with people around me so I couldn't get out. And you can see, I've given several examples of sponsor abuse. So made me go to an AA dance of all things, sober. And I went through the steps, things changed. I didn't have a miraculous awakening at the end of the 5th step. It was gradual, but things totally changed. The way I looked at life was different. I came to realize that what I believed, most of the things I believed were wrong. And I acted on those beliefs that were wrong, and that I was looking at the world wrong. Everything was out there. The world and people were causing me problems. And there's a little pamphlet, was early AA, and the guy talks about going to a meeting with all of his enemies into a room about like this, and when he walked in the door, he was the only one there. And that's how I am. I am my enemy, and I create my problems. My thinking is crazy. I have been sober, done this program, done all kinds of service work, done community service, been on boards of nonprofits. Because I had all this finance stuff, I got asked to be a treasurer on a lot of boards, Whidbey Island Arts Council, with the Children's Theater, my homeowners association, all of this kind of stuff. Anyway, after, I don't know, I've always had lots of stuff, cars, houses, and all that. By 2006, because I had all these great ideas, I'm sober. I'm going to meetings. I've lost everything. I'm living in a 30 by 30 double wide trailer with a wood stove for heat. I have no job. I'm 6 months behind on my rent. My landlord is my ex-partner, not wife, but she had the rental house. I get a new sponsor there on Whitby, and the guy got sober in 1961. He listens to all my crap. Said, "You've been around this program a long time, Mike." He says, "Here's the deal. You keep waiting for your ship to come in. You got to launch something to go out before your ship can come in." And I mean, how simple is that? My great computing mind can't get that. That dawned on me. And he said, "Here's the thought, go get a job." I got a job as a bank manager. I was $50,000 in credit card debt. Within a couple of years, I got all the debt paid off. I called them all up, called the IRS up. I said, "I created the mess. I'm responsible. I'm going to pay you back. I can't do it today. Can you help me?" And they all did. They said, "Here's the workout plan." The IRS said, "If you stick to this plan, we'll waive all the penalties and interest." And I thought, good night. I mean, I've been sober all this time. I've had sponsees. I've done all kinds of stuff. I'm doing the program. The only thing I'm not doing is turning the financial part of my life over to my higher power. He had everything else, and that worked fine. But I always had a better idea. And anyway, I run way over, haven't I? I left out some good stuff and probably shared some stuff that wasn't necessary. So anyway, when I first got the big book, a lot of times you can get summaries in the back and they'll have chapter summaries. And I got the big book and I thought, everybody's talking about 164. I flip it open to 164, I read the paragraph, and guess what? There's a summary. The whole program is right there. It says, trust God, clean house, help others. And I thought, wow, I guess I don't have to read the rest of the book. But sponsor says, yeah, but the book tells you how to do all that, and you're not very skilled at it. So I got my life saved in AA. I went insane in AA and sobriety. I got saved again with another sponsor, and then things really got better. And it was during that period of the second rebirth that Steve and Nancy came along, and a whole lot of other people. So I always end by saying I'm overblessed, and that's not original. There was a guy I knew in my first group. He was a Marine, and he had a great idea. By swimming pool by the O Club, he got up on the roof, poured lighter fluid on his head, lit his head on fire, dove into the pool yelling Geronimo. His tagline was always, I'm overblessed. And I thought, well, if that's good enough for him, that's good enough for me. The fact is that I am truly overblessed. 2 weeks ago, yesterday, I had a pacemaker put in. And I thought, so here's my third rebirth. 2 in AA, 1 with the doc. You do not have to believe this stuff works. You just start doing it and see what happens. It works. And I guess that would be the message that I would like to leave, to just say, you don't have to believe anything. Just follow the instructions. And it's easier if you do it with someone who knows how to read the instructions. And it will amaze you. It amazed me. And when I did it really seriously, that kind of second wave through, it's been incredible. I've got a wife, the only woman I've never cheated on. It's unreal. I mean, I just thought that was normal behavior, and it's not. It's not. I love this program. I mean, I can't say enough for it, and it annoyed me when people would spend too much time on war stories and then run over a lot of time here.
Thank you.